I guess I wanted to continue the discussion we were having, and which was about pronouns and transgenderism in general. And I'm hoping this time, you can extend me the courtesy of considering this discussion an intellectual discussion, and also that I'm trying to operate somewhat as a devil's advocate. And that, personally, if I was to have somebody in my life who was a transgender person, I would try to do whatever I could to properly genderize them with pronouns and so forth. But I just want to talk about the practical problems of pronoun usage.
What example do you have? Because did you see the episode where my friend Rusty called in and we had a long discussion about that?
I did. And we can discuss that as well.
No, that's why I had Rusty call in, because I'm not going to discuss that one.
Yeah, can I ask why you feel that there's the need for a devil's advocate in this conversation? Just because if you're sympathetic to trans identity and our understanding of it, there's plenty of people already who aren't and who are making the arguments against it. So is there really a need for you to play devil's advocate in this issue?
Okay, well, let me try to get into what I'd like to discuss, which is a practical problem. And let me use an analogy, which is that...
maybe before you use the analogy, could you describe the problem that you're trying to, use an analogy to explain?
The problem is it's actually very hard for humans to reprogram their minds to use pronouns that don't make grammatical sense to them. That is the practical problem. It's very difficult, and let me express how difficult it is.
Carl.
When I called in, your call screener misgendered you as she, okay? That's how hard this is.
See, the thing is, so yes, I 100% get that adjusting pronouns is a little difficult, and I've done it before.
I'm saying it's extremely difficult because...
But it's doable. That's the thing.
It is.
It is because I've done it, and I have plenty of friends who've done it. So really what you're saying is you don't want to try hard enough to be able to do it.
Or you're just not comfortable with it.
That's not what I said. I said that maybe... My position is that maybe it is hard enough that we should reconsider... So right.
Okay, hold on. Your position, hold on. Your position, and this may not be how you intend it, but this is exactly what you're saying, is that it is more difficult. It's too much of a challenge for you to adjust the way that you refer to someone, that it matters more to you that it's a challenge for you than making that person comfortable. That is what you're saying in this moment.
I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about everyone.
But that's not true.
Because
people absolutely can and do adjust the way that they use pronouns. And so what you're saying is that because you find it difficult, everybody finds it difficult.
I listened to you on the nonprofits, and I know that Russell is totally on board, right? But he also misgendered you. And I'm saying
and that takes adjustment. It takes, listen, I'm not going to jump onto somebody and say, how dare you use the wrong pronoun for me? As long as they're respectful and just quickly correct it, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I have friends who still accidentally misgender me, and I understand. I'm not going to bite somebody's head off for doing it just because they made a little slip of the tongue. It's like if you accidentally refer to somebody by the wrong name, or if you call your teacher mom by accident. Things happen, language is difficult, brains are complicated, but as long as you are trying, it is something that you can reprogram your brain to do. And in fact, I have done it, my friends have done it, my family has done it. It is not that difficult.
I'm saying it is pretty hard.
Who cares?
For you.
Okay, hold on, Carl. I heard the argument. No, I heard the argument. I don't care about the argument, right? I don't care that you're not comfortable. Can you give another argument? Because that one does not fly.
You want to talk about what's hard? living in a society that says that you are a particular gender that you are not, and refers to you that way, and hurts you, and causes you physical harm, emotional harm, psychological harm, and trauma because of who you are. That's what's hard.
Okay, I'm very interested in hearing what it means. Now, the call screener said that you're not transgender, and I would like some terminology clarification.
The call screener was incorrect. I am non-binary and I identify as transgender. Not every single person who is non-binary uses the trans term, but it is something that is a personal choice. So I personally identify as trans and non-binary.
Okay. Oh, thank you for clearing up the confusion. But I want to know, kind of what it means to you to be transgender, and what, brass tacks. What is it about being identified as a particular gender? Because there's a continuum, right, of people's behaviors that we could identify as classically male or classically female. And people always are on some sort of continuum, and I want to know what non-binary means to you.
So in the way that you personally, so assuming that you identify as a man, in the way that you personally know that you are a man, and that's not something that you can just say, oh, well, I like sports and I like to wear, T-shirts, that makes me a man. Like that's not... that's not all that there is to your gender identity. In the way that you just know that you are a man or just know what your sexuality is, I just know that I am non-binary. And I could talk to you a bit more about issues of dysphoria and things like that. But frankly, it's kind of personal, and I don't particularly want to get into that. But it's one of those things that takes a lot of self-exploration. And a lot of people have kind of a long journey of figuring out how they identify, how they feel in regards to gender, how they wish to be presented and interpreted by the world. And it's not something that I could really sum up quite easily in the time that we have on the show. That's something that is a longer conversation to have, and there are a lot of resources out there of people talking about their gender identity experience and the way that they came to identify the way that they do. And I could talk a little bit about my own personal background and how I got to the identity that I have, if you like. But that, again, it's a little bit personal. I don't know how much I'm comfortable discussing on the show, but yeah, I don't really know if I answered your question just then, but.
Yeah, I'm. Well, let me give you an example, a personal example from my life, which is that I operated as a stay-at-home dad because I did not want to put my infant children into daycare, and my wife was working, and so I was caring for my children since they were 8 weeks till 4 years on or so, as the primary caregiver whenever my wife was at work. And that is not a classically male trait.
My dad did the same thing.
Okay. And so that's kind of, so the question for me is that transgenderism, or is it just that I am not?
So there's a difference between gender roles and gender identity. And they're not one-to-one. So if you have a particular gender identity, you don't have to fulfill those gender roles to still be that gender identity. There are men who can wear dresses and be comfortable, who can wear makeup, and they are still men. And there are women who like to play rugby and, I don't know, any kind of stereotypically feminine or masculine things. You can do those things and still hold your gender identity to be whatever it is. Gender identity and gender roles are not connected in the way that people tend to assume that they are. So just because somebody is a man and enjoys wearing dresses because they think that they're comfortable and they feel really, it makes them feel good about themselves and feel attractive and whatever else, that doesn't make them not a man. But a trans woman who wears a dress is not a man in a dress. It's not a one-to-one. You don't have to fulfill every single gender role of your gender identity.
Okay.
The thing is, so the problem I think that we're having here is that understanding what it's like to be trans is really difficult if you aren't trans. It's one of those things that it's an experience that you have to know what it's like. And I can't sit here and tell you what it's like to be non-binary in the same way that you couldn't sit there and tell me exactly how it feels to be a man, because I'm not a man and I haven't had those feelings. So it's complicated because we're talking about matters of personal experience and personal identity, and those are incredibly individual experiences, and it can be really, really difficult to explain to somebody else what that feels like.
Okay, so I mean, if we go back to like what gender classically is or whatever, I look at it as it's a collection of traits, and typically those traits are assigned to the particular sexes, biological sexes, because there's hormones that drive people to have those traits. So I'm just trying to figure out what non-binary means.
It's not as clear-cut as you think, even when you're talking about biological sex. And this is something that we've discussed, that I think was discussed a little bit when I was on the show last time, but biological sex is just as constructed as gender. And anybody that has taken a biology class...
Constructed?
Yeah, anybody that has taken a biology class above like 9th grade, any kind of bio major in college can tell you that biological sex is not definitively one thing or the other. Yes, there are collections of traits that we typically associate with one thing or the other, but just having, XX or XY is typically how people like to talk about it, of like, if you have XX, you're a girl, and if you have XY, you're a boy. That's not always true. There are people who have XY chromosomes but have feminine quote-unquote feminine biological sex characteristics because they have androgen insensitivity. And there's all kinds of different ways in which biology is not clear-cut one way or the other.
Those are kind of corner cases.
But it's not actually. It's far more common than people realize. Biological sex in almost any species is never as clear-cut as people believe, because the last time that they took biology was 9th grade.
What I'm saying is, if you take an average population of biologically male and an average population of biologically female, you will have these traits, like males are aggressive, females are typically more nurturing.
You're just making generalizations that aren't actually biological traits. A lot of those have to do with socialization.
There is a nurture part, but you're denying that there's any sort of nature part of this?
I'm not denying it. What I'm saying is that it is really, really incredibly difficult to tell exactly what is coming from biology and what is coming from socialization, because those factors are so intertwined, and it can be really, really difficult. Like, for example, a lot of times people talk about how, quote unquote, men have better spatial visualization, spatial awareness than women do. And a lot of that has to do with the kinds of toys that we're exposed to as children and what we grow up playing with. So I have fantastic spatial awareness, and that's not me being like full of myself. I know for a fact that I have really good spatial awareness because I grew up playing with Legos and I played with Rubik's Cubes and I did all of those different things that involve building and playing with space. And people who don't do that growing up, it actually affects the way that your brain develops. So a lot of the things...
I agree with that. There's like, throwing balls, playing catch or whatever, that enhances spatial awareness or whatever.
But the point that I'm trying to get at with that is that.
But I would say that the science would say that there's still biological traits between the sexes.
Can I ask what your level of education in regards to biology is?
I took biology as electives in a 4-year school.
Okay, so, but it was like first year bio, or were you taking like advanced biological sciences, genetic sciences?
I'm an engineer.
Okay, and this isn't meant to like discredit you or say that you're not educated, because I'm not a bio major either, but I have spoken to people who are biology majors and who do have expertise in the field that do say biological sex is not as clear-cut as we think. And almost any kind of research paper that you read about it will say biological sex is not as clear-cut as you think. There's a fungus that has literally thousands of different biological sexes. Birds have different ways that they deal with biological sex. There are fish that change
We're talking
gender.
about people. We're talking about people, and on average, what people.
But the point is that nature is not as clear-cut as you think. It is never a case of one category or another category. It is
and I'm not
always.
saying it is. I just discussed that everybody is on some continuum, right?
Yeah.
But
so
then on average, there's a mean for these different
But
traits.
why does that matter?
Yeah. What are you getting at, Carl? I mean, you have to be going somewhere, right? Because if we're just asserting things and I don't know, just for some reason, I'd like to get to the next call.
I think the point I was just trying to make there was that EJ was trying to say that sex is not related to, or that gender is not related to sex at all.
That's
and
not
I'm saying
what I
that's not
said.
true.
That isn't what I said.
Carl, go back in and listen. There's been time. You can call back again and we'll get the chance to talk about it. I didn't really have a lot of room to talk because that's not my area. I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to.
To clarify a little bit, to clarify a little bit, because I think you may have misinterpreted what I said slightly. When I was talking about biological sex as being constructed and gender as being constructed, what it means is that we have associations that we place on the different traits that are associated with each of those constructions. And because of those associations that we place, it makes us interpret people in a certain way. And really what gender comes down to is at birth, a doctor looks at your genitalia and decides, does that look more like a penis or does it look more like a vagina? And they pick it and they say, okay, you're a boy or you're a girl. And that doesn't always line up with how people actually identify. And
you said the vagina word.
Oh no, I said no. But the point is, yes, for a lot of people, it does line up. A lot of people, their biological sex, that a doctor looks at their genitalia and says, okay, you're a boy or a girl. For a lot of people, yes, it does line up with how they identify in their gender. But for a lot of people, it doesn't. There are literally millions of transgender people in the world. And we don't agree with the doctor's assessment of our gender. And we don't want to live in the way that a doctor said that we should live just because they looked at our genitalia at birth and said, you're a boy or a girl. That's what it comes down to.
Okay, and so I don't have any problem with that. So
cool. Then we're in agreement.
Right. What is your issue?
Yeah, I do have a problem with one thing that you've discussed on nonprofits, and I would like to
let's make it quick because I have a whole lot of other callers, and I don't want this whole episode to be this call.
I do not agree that you should give children puberty blockers.
Did one of us say that?
I don't care if you agree. I mean, that's between the child, their parents, and their doctor. It's got nothing to do with you.
Right. And I think, well, no, I think it's bad for the child, and I don't think that they can consent.
Carl,
to doing.
Carl, there are a lot of parents that make choices for their kids, and we don't have, we don't have a place in there. It's between their doctor.
It's literally none of your business is the point. It is none of your business. It does not affect you personally.
If you're damaging children.
Okay, so Carl, you're saying you view that as child abuse. Okay, I hear you.
No, listen, you are wrong because you want to know why? Because if that kid has to grow up and go through the wrong puberty, that kid is at so much more risk for trauma, for depression, for anxiety, for suicide attempts. So I would so much rather have a child with a higher risk of osteoporosis than a dead child.
What about the other risks? What about the fact that they may not be able to procreate because of the damages?
Not everybody wants to procreate.
By these artificial drugs. But how can a child decide that?
But it's not a child deciding that is the thing. Puberty blockers don't significantly decrease fertility. And we don't have the problem is that people think that trans people don't matter and there aren't enough studies on how to deal with trans health. That's the problem.
Do we have actual accurate information that puberty blockers do not affect fertility?
We don't know for sure because the problem is that some people aren't going to be.
So do no harm.
Listen. Go do research because there are academic papers out there that could tell you the risks better than I can. I'm not a medical expert.
We're good. Carl, look back. We'll take a look at this and we'll table this because I want to get on to the next call. Okay?
Okay. I know it's difficult for you.
Okay.
Well, let's see how difficult it is.
Oh, he got a last word in. Wow.
No, let's just see how difficult it is for him to get back on the show.
Yeah.
So it was talked about in the comments, and I really do want to discuss this, why we are talking about trans issues on an atheist show. And that is because atheism, the atheist term, I reject the assertion that there is a God. If we did that, we'd do one episode, peace out, and walk out. But we share a world with other people. And along with atheism, a lot of us, and myself in particular, and a lot of people that I know and care about, we are secular humanists. It involves being kind and good to others and building the best kind of world that you can. And that means being inclusive. It means being considerate. And it's not that hard to be considerate. And I feel like there's a moral obligation when you have a platform to be able to help that. So for people in the comments who are saying, oh, I didn't want the, sociology experience or whatever, I get it, but that's what we did.
There's that, and also everybody belongs in atheism, and that includes trans atheists, that includes atheists who are people of color, that includes gay atheists and bi atheists, and people of all different walks of life. They're welcome in the atheist movement too.
And here, you have a home here.
So being inclusive welcomes those people too, and talking about these issues tells them they have a place in the atheist movement. And I've had people reach out to me and say, I was so excited to see you using they, them pronouns on an atheist show because I haven't felt welcome in this movement, because so many parts of the atheist movement are virulently transphobic. Just looking at the comments on some of the videos that I'm in are just, there's people calling me a dyke, there's people calling me a he/she, or like asking, is that a boy or a girl? Like, just virulently transphobic, virulently homophobic. And being inclusive and making those people feel welcome is so important. And talking about these issues is so important. We're not just atheists, we're people too.
Damn straight. Thank you so much for being here and doing that. Really appreciate it.